Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webcast, Enabling Self-Service and Responsiveness for Data Lakes. My name is Ben Dunmire, and I'm a Business Intelligence and Analytics Consultant here at Thorogood, based in our Philadelphia office. If you have any questions for me, please feel free to get in touch with me with my contact details on the screen if you'd like to discuss today's topic. Here's our agenda for the session. I'll start with a brief intro of Thorogood and then move on to discuss my definition of self-service and responsiveness in the realm of modern data architectures and kind of why they're important. I'll highlight some of the foundational aspects of modern data platforms, or data lakes as I'll refer to it by, and how those design decisions impact delivery of a solution which enables self-service and responsiveness. So for those of you who don't know us, Thorogood is an independent global professional services firm specializing in business intelligence and analytics strategies, solutions, and services with a focus on our customers. We are a global company with offices in New York, Philadelphia, London, Bangalore, India, Singapore, and Sao Paulo, Brazil. All of our consultants are recruited and trained in the same way to develop a unique mix of skills, blending business understanding in the form of industry and functional experience with strong technical aptitude and a deep understanding of analytical tools and techniques. We offer a full range of BI and analytics services, including strategy and roadmaps, requirements, design, implementation, and training and support. In terms of the technologies we work with, we are an independent consulting firm, meaning we don't work with one specific technology. We do, however, work and partner with many of the key players in the market in order to provide our clients with the solution that best suits their needs. When thinking about data lake solutions, they're often made up of several different technologies covering the platform, reporting and analytics, DevOps, governance tools, and certainly other components, and principally should be tool agnostic to be able to service future needs and requirements. Working with many technologies in the industry allows us to use the appropriate tools depending on the situation. So let's move on to talk a bit about the theory behind building a self-service and responsive platform. So why am I using the term self-service and responsiveness when talking about data lake and cloud platforms? I actually think they're pretty key topics to be thinking about because we want our data platforms to enable users and be able to satisfy their data and analytic needs. So for self-service, you'd often hear this term when discussing visualization, modeling, and data analysis tools, but it's also pretty relevant for data platforms. To give us a definition, self-service is using strategy, technologies, and implementation patterns to put users in a position where they can readily access data and work with it how they want to. And then we can think about kind of why that matters. What does that do for us? We remove dependence on IT to produce all data solutions and applications and give the organization the opportunity to work with data in the way they want to. So instead of a small group being responsible for data solutions, we enable many people to do it, and to varying degrees. Likewise, we know user communities are starving to get access to data, whether it's new sources, maybe some log data, or maybe just combine new sources together using tools that they're familiar with. You want to enable key functionalities and capabilities. For responsiveness, and this is probably one that's a bit more foreign to people, but we're thinking about the ability to respond to change quickly and effectively. To build a platform that is able to very easily meet new data requirements or asks. We desperately want flexibility in our data solutions, so we're able to support user demands, provide data and analytic capabilities in a way that provides value now and into the future. Why do we care if the platform can respond? We know data and analytic needs are going to be constantly changing and evolving and become more sophisticated and more frequent. A data platform must be able to shift with those needs. If it can, it's not going to be effective and it's not going to provide any value. We know things change rapidly and sometimes very severely, whether it's a brand new set of data sources or new privacy legislation. The platform has to keep up. So now let's get into maybe how we can extract information from our user community to figure out how to make the platform responsive and provide self-serve capabilities for your specific case. So this concept here, personas, actually has its roots in the Agile methodology. Some of you may be familiar with it or use it conceptually. The goal is really to think about who is using a product, in this case a data platform, and what they want to get from it and how they want to use it. So if we get a good enough view of users, we can build and then promote the platform to enable self-serve ambitions and respond to new user needs. So here's a quick way to think about personas. Essentially, we're capturing key information from our users, how they use data, things they can't do now, their roles, their ambitions, and that specific information fuels the design and implementation of the data platform. As with any product, it needs to be built with specific users in mind. So here's just a quick exercise I like to use, and there are certainly a number of adaptations like this, but it provides an avenue to think about personas and capture them. So I think about who my user is and what their role is. I need to determine what it is they want to do, or maybe the functionality they want to have to help them do their job. And then I want to understand, why they want that feature or capability. If I have develop a broad enough assessment of how my organization wants to use the data platform and what's driving those needs, I can feed that into my design. And an interesting line I like to think about, understanding what a data lake is and what it needs to do is as important as understanding how to technically build it. So we constantly want to think about what's driving our design, what's driving value, and then figure out how to technically deliver it. So and that type of thinking manifests itself into some pretty tangible ideas, things that we can expect users to be requesting, asking about, thinking about. And knowing these allows us to build a solution that meets self-serve needs and lets us anticipate future enhancements and changes so we can be responsive. I'll just go through a few examples here to illustrate my point. We may have requests for new data to be added to the data platform. Maybe we want to change existing data to build some new ETL or update some sources. There might be an issue or problem that arises that needs to be fixed very quickly and efficiently. We want to explore unused data. So, a big selling point of data platforms and data lakes is the ability to get a cumulative look at data and be able to work with data that's not necessarily completely modeled or productionized. Creating relational models, so thinking about data marts and data warehouses that are serve a very, very specific purpose. And then the ask to perform analytics in various different ways. So back to our quick anecdote for defining data lake personas. I'll try to illustrate a few kind of basic examples of what I mean, and then explore how the data platform might look to accomplish it. Let's say a group wants to add some new tables or columns to their data warehouse, which is fed from the data lake. And in order to solve that, we principally want to ingest all available data from a source into something like a raw layer in the data lake to make it accessible. By staging everything in the lake, we can quickly and rapidly get data into downstream applications. We're not having to go the whole way back to a source to get that information. And another one here, which is actually pretty common, especially for something like Nielsen or IRI data. Users want to combine some third-party data with internal information. So you might think about publishing a common defined pattern to both ingest and then integrate data, which allows users to see, what generally works, how it works, and then accelerate, what they want to do, accelerate their delivery. And the last one here, very broadly, users want to do analytics on a brand new data set, likely to explore to see if there's anything valuable that they might want to productionize. Just an example here, data catalogs have become a pretty popular component to infer schemas and enable discovery of data, which allows users to go to one place with a single set of tools and then query and explore data to see what's available. So these examples are simple ideas, but the point is you want to think about users and tailor a data lake platform to empower self-service behavior and be responsive to what users really want. We've talked pretty substantially about positioning for data lake platforms, why it's important to be responsive and enable self-service. I'm going to try to center this around something a bit more discrete and tangible with some ideas that let us achieve those objectives. So the first one here being data and platform governance. How do I want my data to be managed and worked with? How do I want my platform to be governed? What guidelines do I want to put in place? We talked about this a bit, but encouraging data discovery and exploration. I want people to be able to get to data, to use data, and to find insights. And I don't want to kind of restrict them from using the platform. Having transparency of the sources and ETL transformation. So very frequently we want to know where data is coming from and how it's been transformed from point A to point B. And having a way to demonstrate that transparency to show that those activities is pretty valuable. Having a platform that's secure and controlled, so we don't want to be worried about users compromising data or compromising some infrastructure. We want the platform to be something that people can go to and use and not worry about some very important and sometimes complicated technical backdrops. Establishing common design patterns. So when we're thinking about the data platform, there are common ways that we get data into it. We move data through the layers, and then we send to some downstream applications or data marts or data warehouses. If we can think about illustrating and publishing some of those common design patterns, that can often facilitate self-service and responsiveness. It can give a bit of a kickstart to do things. Organizing the data lake, so data lakes generally being file-based storage, it is pretty important to think about, logically how things are organized, whether that's, S3 buckets in AWS or data lake storage for Azure or something else. How are those objects being stored and how is the directory structured? Data lineage, so kind of similarity to transparency, but am I able to see something from a column in a data warehouse? Can I somehow track that the whole way back to a source? And thinking about ways in which you can enable that and do that is very, I think helpful for users to have that information and see that information. Having a future roadmap, so maybe this is future data sources or maybe it's future enhancements and add-ons and new features that the data platform will have. And then user empowerment and education. So, very frequently we can provide some types of trainings and material and things that can help users learn and understand the system and then use it to best effect. So we kind of established a basis for our discussion. I'll jump into kind of where we're seeing key areas to focus your data platform delivery effort. And what I'm going to look to do here is explore some specific areas where we see quite a bit of investment for data lake platforms. And I'm not going to go through a ton of detail, but kind of try to highlight some key points. So DevOps is probably a term you've come across. It's the idea of using strategies and methodologies to assist in the software development cycle. So we're looking for ways to optimize efforts and introduce automation, reduce risk and manual errors, and ultimately make changes more quickly with proper oversight. And before I go a bit further on DevOps, what I'm looking to do here is to basically call out components or functionalities which can be incorporated into data platforms with the objective of enabling self-service and establishing a responsive nature. And from those kind of design and implementation components, what is it that we want to accomplish? How will a technical choice or an investment in a tool result in functionality or facilities for data consumers to get value out of the platform? So let's just go through it for DevOps here. So the first one being an integration of code management and CI/CD tools. So if I can have a pretty compelling way in which code is managed and then deployed through the environment, that really can help the user community. Having templates, build and release pipelines. So, we don't want people getting bogged down in setting up these sometimes pretty technical CI/CD components. If we can give them a template to use, that can kind of accelerate delivery. Having the infrastructure and kind of permission set up. So if I can kind of bring my user community, my development and application teams into something that's already set up and give them the tools that they need, that can really help us in being responsive to new things. Establishing support and communication forums, so thinking about ways in which we can have a community where people can ask questions and work on things together, it's always valuable. Establishing best practices and standards, so thinking things of naming conventions, tagging, other things like that, which we usually want to include in infrastructure instantiation and things like that. Running auto remediation, so we can't expect every deployment to be perfect, and there might be cases where we're looking to recognize issues or things that kind of aren't to standards and kind of fixing them for folks. So a bit of help to ensure self-service activities are working the way they should. And what's kind of the result? What do we want to get out of this? What's the objective? Having a quicker time to production, so helping teams get their applications to production and data to production faster. Developing with agility, so kind of able to respond to new things and work in a context with DevOps that allows us to make changes kind of rapidly and change direction if we need to. Recognizing automation, so really a common theme in self-service is if we don't have to get kind of bogged down on focusing on technical things and we can automate processes, that can often help people focus on the things they want to focus on. Having less dependence on IT, specifically for deployments, if we can share that burden across many different teams, that can help be responsive to changes. Having a quicker response to issues, so we've talked about this. If something comes up, I want to be able to address it very quickly, and DevOps helps to do that. Then having kind of total transparency in the landscape. I want to know when things are created. I want to know when people are creating new things, and that ultimately helps in our responsiveness. If we're seeing a ton of new databases being created, why is that happening? So next, I'll talk about platform governance and design standards. So that's a really broad and probably certainly much deeper topic here, but I'm thinking about guidelines for usage. What are the principles which define our data platform? What practices do we insist on? What's our strategy now and going forward? Basically, how do you ensure that the platform continues to be built to match the vision? First one being kind of naming conventions, and whether this is of tools, ETL tools, or maybe files and objects, and also data lake directory standards. So we want a very kind of structured way in which files are stored in our data lake storage, and establishing a kind of pretty strong set of standards can really ensure that there's scalability in the environment, and going forward it can be used effectively. Defining ingestion and transformation patterns. So if I can show, ways in which we ingest data from on-prem databases or some cloud sources, and show how that data gets transformed through our data lake layers, that can be really valuable and used pretty effectively by everybody. Establishing a connectivity to data sources, so helping the responsiveness to have connections to all our important data sources and be able to kind of call on them when needed. And in the same way, having that access or connectivity to consumable outputs. So how am I allowing people to connect to data that's in the data lake or the data platform? How are they connecting to it? How are they getting to it? How do we do that? Establishing coding standards, which is always helpful. Defining methods for interacting with data. So similar to the point before, how are we expecting users, either application teams or data consumers, how are we expecting them to get to data and use it? And then data cataloging is a topic we touched on, a good way to kind of establish some methodology for defining metadata for the data lake and allowing access to query information. So with these kind of design components, what are we hoping to achieve? The ability to more easily change solutions. So if I have common patterns, if I have strong standards, it should be easier for me to make adjustments and to help people and influence changes. Having less dependence on IT, so another kind of mention of this. So self-service, if there are a lot of things that are kind of set up standards or set up the platform is well governed, people should just be able to use it and use it effectively. Establishing data access patterns, so whether that's the data sources or to querying data is important. The growth of the data catalog, and here I'm just meaning kind of data in the platform. So one of the value we see in a data lake is getting a ton of data into it, a ton of important and valuable data. So the more governance and standards and the more that they're kind of streamlined and thoughtful, we're able to grow that data pretty quickly and effectively. Having well-organized data lakes, so you probably heard the term swamp, data lake storage can pretty quickly get very kind of confusing and unusable. Enabling the ability to explore all available data. So one of the points of the data lake platform and these platforms is to have all the data in one place and then think about how we're allowing people to get to information that they might have not been able to get to before, just kind of see what's available to them. So all right, I'll kind of narrow it down a bit from platform governance and talk a bit more specifically about data governance. So certainly not a new topic, but it's becoming pretty incredibly important as we land tons of data into file-based data lake storage. And we think of it as an ongoing effort. There kind of must be a joint effort between business and IT groups. It's really to define a way to consistently, safely, and really thoughtfully use data in the organization. So we have here having really an organizational strategy. So what are our ideals for data governance? What are the things we've invested in and want to kind of follow through on? Having a process to identify sensitive data, particularly with some recent legislation and just in general important attributes. Master data management, which you'll probably see a bit more on kind of data warehousing and data marts. Establishing data dictionaries, and we mentioned catalogs. So, establishing some entities that allow us to get more information from our data and understand our data a bit better. Data quality and integrity monitoring. So you can think about ways, if we're thinking about self-service, we're telling people go in and use this data, and we want to make sure that data is of high quality, of integrity. So thinking about ways in which we recognize issues with data or things like that, we can pretty easily compromise our self-confidence and self-service if the data is not kind of high quality. Then establishing kind of some data flow mapping. So we talked about this a bit. If I can show how data is getting from point A to point B, that can answer questions for user. It can provide context that might not have existed before. So with some of these data governance investments, so what are some of the goals I'm looking to achieve? Establishing requirements to ingest new data sources. So if you want to ingest a new data source, you have to achieve A, B, and C to get there. So this provides clarity, and it also ensures that data governance principles are being followed. Knowing what data is available and where, so it's incredibly valuable. I want to know what's out there, whether it's sensitive data or whether it's data I'm wanting to just work with and explore. It's incredibly important. This thinking really drives the importance of governance assets and ultimately helps to kind of improve them. If we can convince application teams and users to to use data governance tools. That'll hopefully make them want to make them better, to provide feedback on them, to add to their own data dictionaries, things like that. Ability to identify sensitive data very quickly and easily, that's paramount importance in many cases. Describing data lineage mapping. So I mentioned this, users are often asking about, where did you get this aggregation from? And if we're able to kind of get some insight into that, it can be pretty valuable in self-service cases. And then making data more consumable. So like if my data is available, I'm kind of achieving my self-service requirements. I'm wanting to think about how I can give the right data to the right people and allow them to use it how they want to use it. Pretty interesting and sometimes overlooked topic is user empowerment and awareness. So technical standards and implementations are certainly important, but without some means to share technical possibilities or demonstrate design patterns or maybe highlight reasons of the value of the platform, it's hard to get buy-in from the community. So what can we do? Providing training material and documentation, so providing that information in something that's a easy platform to see. Setting up infrastructure. So if maybe an IT organization or central group can provide guidance and set up infrastructure, application teams and user groups don't have to worry about that. That works particularly for the cloud. Establishing development templates, so we've talked about this a bit. If we can kind of show a pattern that works well, that's really going to help. Doing some marketing outreach, so what is the data platform, how does it work, how can you get access to it. Doing something like office hours or establishing communities is always useful, and then having a forum to receive feedback. So one of our keys is being responsive. Like how do we be responsive if we don't know what needs to change or what's coming next? So thinking about how we're getting information about upcoming needs or changes to existing needs. And from here, we're hoping people ask the right questions to the right people, provide that clarity and contact information, knowing where they can go for support. So are there forums, are there places that we can get information or people we can pull on? Giving a bit of a kickstarter, so if, we can set up enough empowerment for both application team and kind of data consumers to kind of kickstart their work, that can really drive them to delivery. Like I said, kind of quick to onboard, quick to get going. Having alignment on expectations. So if we have a shared understanding of where we are and where we want to go, both on the kind of user application and kind of IT side, that can be pretty valuable. And then creating organic growth. So the better we're able to empower and make users and kind of the organization aware of what's available and how it's used, we can organically grow it. We can get people interested to use it. We can get people asking about it. So another one here, and this is one that's been kind of more prevalent with cloud storage, computing, tool integrations. We want to collect information. We want to monitor what's using data in the lake, who's putting data in it, et cetera. So we're to kind of address issues and be proactive. So we have data usage monitoring. Who's using data? When are they accessing it? When are they accessing it? Getting insight into cost and performance analysis, particularly for resources. How much are things costing? Can we help teams to better size their resources? Activity monitoring, which is really important. I want to know when people are bringing new data into the data platform. I want to know when they're changing it, and I want to know when they're running jobs. All this information is incredibly valuable. And maybe think about routines to identify and call out non-compliant data. So am I missing a tag on some sensitive data? Can I figure out how to identify that and resolve that quickly? Secure infrastructure, so we want to make sure the configurations are secure and staying the same. And then think about ways to share this information. So users, application teams are pretty interested in this information. It can help them be better about what they're doing and be responsive. So how do we share that? From here, we're wanting to have transparency in what's happening, getting real-time feedback, so I can get some information and make a decision based on it. And really, one of the goals of monitoring is making proactive decisions. So I can be responsive if I am seeing things that I'm monitoring. I can be responsive to make technical changes to correct incorrect behavior. Getting quicker alerts on issues, so if a problem arises, I want to know about it as soon as I can. The ability to share with stakeholders is terribly important. People might not be technically involved. They can have the information that's important to them. And then kind of helping to resolve data integrity issues. So keeping up that confidence in self-service. I want my data to be high quality and of high integrity. Well, the last one here is targeted tool selection. So I want to assess user objectives and those personas we talked about, and really weigh the technical possibilities and hopefully recognize value where we kind of find that sweet spot between user goals and technical options. So a well-formulated and thoughtful tool architecture can really lead to a positive data interactions and really greatly influence the ability to be self-serve. So a bit of a different format here, but we have the technology choices. So, what tools are available, what should I use, what fits in my implementation. User capability. So often we're thinking about where capability lies. What skills do users have? What are they familiar with? What do they want to use? adhering to organization standards. So, we're definitely going to have security and privacy requirements, and we also would expect, organizations to have some direction on technologies, maybe whether it's Azure, AWS, Hadoop, something different, everything on-prem. How does that impact the tools we look at and work with? And then the fit with other data assets. So, there's a ton of investment in on-prem and cloud assets that are already in place. How do we best utilize them? We don't want to redo them. We don't want to compromise them. How does our tool selection for the data platform, help enable really clear end-to-end solutions? And ultimately, we're trying to get to the ideal tool architecture there. Let me briefly wrap up today, and I'm about out of time, so just kind of talk a bit about organizational data and analytics strategy. So, we really talked about, why it's important to build a data platform that enables self-service activities and can effectively respond and adapt to change. So we really kind of seen a relationship between organizational data strategy and then the specific activities that are geared toward something like the modern data platform or data lake. So the key components of an organizational implementation: the tools, technologies, capabilities, the data, so the many data sources and refined data we're working with, people, those responsible for strategy or implementation, setting up the data platform or maybe doing analytics, whatever it is, and then the process by which all of it gets done kind of integrates together. And kind of with this, we want to feed into that modern data platform vision. So I won't go into detail. I've kind of talked about some of these spokes already. We want to be able to know how to govern it, how to promote it, how to drive user adoption for the platform, and we can kind of see that manifest itself from organizational strategies. And really, this data platform strategy and vision should feed back into the fundamental approach to data and technology. Now that we have our platform, do we need to invest in analytic and reporting tools? Do we need to maybe overhaul DevOps practices to be more responsive to business needs, thinking like that? So I found it as a really interesting dynamic when we can take something very specific, a modern data platform kind of strategy, and then kind of see how it compares and contrasts to our overall kind of data and organization strategies. So ultimately, this is what kind of is driving organizations' digital transformations. So we are out of time here. Feel free with my contact details on screen to reach out to me with any questions or feedback. Thank you very much for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day.